What's up, everyone? It's Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at My House. As we continue to introduce some of our newer staff members, we are doing a two-part series with Katie, one of our case managers. Bryan and Katie talk for about an hour, so we're going to split this episode into two parts. This is part one, and 1 week from now on Wednesday, you will be able to tune back in to listen to part two. Also, we are going to be talking about the subjects of domestic violence and assault during these episodes, so this is a general trigger warning for those topics throughout the course of these next two episodes. For now, enjoy the show. My Voice Season 3, Episode 3 with Bryan and Katie. My Voice provides those with lived experience in homelessness, addiction, mental and behavioral health struggles, and domestic violence with a platform to tell their story in their words. Every episode is conducted anonymously in order to facilitate a candid and comfortable place for guests to tell their story. My Voice is hosted by Brian Fields, who works as a case manager here at the My House Youth Drop-In Center in Wasilla, Alaska. We now join a My Voice conversation, already in progress.
If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oatmeal.
Oatmeal?
Yeah.
What? Like, wait, hold on. Yeah, what? Hold on. So, like, like plain oatmeal, or
well,
like
you can put like so much stuff in it. You didn't say I couldn't add other things to the oatmeal.
it's one food. You
Well,
can,
then-
that would make it multiple foods if you put stuff in there. So we're talking like plain Jane oatmeal. That's oh.
I did it like every day for a couple of years for lunch. And I never got sick of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I hate oatmeal. So I've been to jail a lot, and they serve oatmeal all the time. And you would take the bowl and flip it upside down, and it would just stay there.
Well, yeah, I don't want prison oatmeal.
Yeah,
because
it's not.
My son has told me,
They're not.
no.
It's not good. That was a PTSD moment for me. I think mine would be mac and cheese. I love me some good mac and cheese. I love cheese and I love noodles, so it's like the best of both worlds. Moving on before I just pass out from my affection for mac and cheese. So, Katie, where are you from?
I am from Southern California.
Southern California. Woo, dude, that's so cool. I'm just from Ketchikan. So.
Well, it's one of the few places in Alaska I've been.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place. But anyways, Southern California. Wow. So what was that like?
Very different than Alaska.
Yeah, I
that's
can
where
imagine.
I learned to drive, and I was so scared the first time I had to drive in the winter because, we have no snow there.
Right.
But, my kids are very upset that they've never been to Disneyland, and we used to go like 4 or 5 times a year. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I can imagine traffic is pretty bad. I've driven in like Orlando before, and it was absolutely insane. Like, I don't understand how people aren't just in crazy accidents every minute of the day.
Yeah.
'Cause
I remember
those
the
highways
first
are
time
crazy.
we drove out of LA and I saw stars and I thought
Yeah.
there was something wrong with the sky because
Yeah.
I didn't realize you could actually see them.
Right.
It was so smoggy and
That's
it's
crazy.
so weird.
That's so crazy. Okay. So we're from Southern California. Childhood. What was your childhood like?
So I'm 8 years younger than my brother and
Okay.
sister.
One
8
brother,
and
one
9.
sister?
One brother, one sister. So it was almost like being an only child for a lot of my childhood. My brother and sister both wanted out of the house as soon as they could get out of the house. So
Right. Yeah.
my sister moved out for a while when she was 17. But I don't blame them. I spent a lot of time kind of isolating in my room and away from my parents as much as I could. So I was a little upset that they would leave me behind, but
Yeah. Yeah. When you say you isolated, was there just not either? So you didn't have a connection with brother and sister. Did you not really have a connection with mom and dad either?
My mom had me when she was like 36 and she was not a young 45, I think.
Yeah.
I'm over 40 and have grandkids, but
Right.
she was like that age when she had me. So she was tired a lot. And I think it was kind of a full-time job for her taking care of my dad, even though he was working. So he built Zamboni machines.
Okay.
And he was a Baptist pastor.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. So was household like pretty strict?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to a Christian school.
Okay.
Did the same school the entire time of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What did that look like? What was like the structure wrapped around like your childhood?
So I had to wear a dress every day to school.
Yeah.
It had to go at least to your knee.
Okay.
It was not allowed to be shorter than that.
Mm-hmm.
It was, so my graduating class was like between 20 and 25 people.
Right.
So when I say I'm valedictorian, that's not as impressive when you know you have 20 or 25 people in the class.
I think it's still pretty cool,
but you don't really get away with a whole lot because all the past Baptist pastors kind of know each other. And
right.
yeah, so there's not a lot you're going to get away with.
Did you like act out? So I know a lot. There was like a similar school in Ketchikan, and I knew a lot of those kids just rebel very hard because there was so much wrapped around them where they felt, I just need to escape. And so when they got a chance to, it was like, "Rah!"
You know, I was the one that everybody thought was the good kid.
Oh, you're one of those. Yeah. I had a couple friends like that.
And for the most part, I made it through my high school graduation before I left a note for my parents to tell them that I was pregnant because I was afraid my dad would physically hurt me. No. I can remember laying in bed at night thinking he was just like, I was going to wake up one day and my mom was going to be dead.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what would set him off or how he would get set off or how bad it would be. Uh-huh. So I definitely didn't want to tell him in person.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
But I'm also an anxious person, so I was worrying the whole time about whether or not he found it, if he took it out on my mom.
Yeah.
And so I called before I came home to see.
Yeah.
All he really said that night was, "Boy, am I disappointed in you."
Oh, my gosh.
But I think if I had been in the place in my life then where I am now, that wouldn't have hurt me so much.
Yeah. I can understand, too, because we just want to be accepted by our parents so much. I mean, it's human nature, right? Like, you strive hard to just get their acceptance, and when you don't get that, it can be absolutely crushing. So you had mentioned some abuse from your father. Was that throughout your whole life, or did something change throughout your childhood, or...
I think I just was like in my own little, when you're a kid, you don't really notice a whole lot. And what you do notice, you assume is normal because that's the only normal you've ever seen.
Right.
I just assumed that every woman had to be put in her place, so to speak, because that's what it was called. You don't talk back. You do what you're supposed to. I've never really been good at that, but
yeah.
I don't remember exactly when it was that I realized not every family was like that. And even now I feel like, well, what do you mean this never happened to you? It was so normal for me. It's just, everybody should know what it feels like because it's...
Yeah, that's such a hard concept for a lot of people to understand, and something that I don't think anybody thinks about. What is other people's normal? What is their life looked like to where I can understand why you are the way that you are, right? And us as service providers, that's like extremely important for us to be able to identify. Because if I can't identify what is it that's really bringing this behavior here, then I'm not going to be able to address the actual issue, right?
Yeah.
So when you say it was like your normal, there wasn't any fear wrapped around that? Like as a child, was like it scary? Was it?
So I never really I didn't talk to my dad a whole lot. I just remember, I think it must have been a subconscious thing of like, well, if my mom says this to him, he gets upset. So maybe if I just don't talk, he can't get mad.
Right.
So it was a lot of just not, he would come home from work. After work, he would go to sleep in the floor watching TV, and I would just kind of play in my room or go outside or stay away. It wasn't until, and I do remember the instance where I was like in the bathtub playing with something, and I heard my brother's head hit the wall, and he left like finger marks around his neck. Even then, he went to school after that, and nobody said a word.
Wow.
So I don't know if they assumed it had been somebody else or maybe a kid that he
Right.
was fighting with. I feel like people had to have known. How could they have not known,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And just for anybody listening, if you ever even have a thought or a concern, the least you can do is pick up the phone and call. You can call anonymously. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give your information. But I think a lot of times, you know, it's scary for people to want to get involved in those situations. Yeah. And us as a society has built this thing where out of sight, out of mind. If I don't see it, I'll just kind of look over here. And if I don't see it, then it is what it is, right?
To add a more interesting dynamic, my grandma lived next door. So
oh, goodness.
It was my mom's mom, though, but she was in her late 80s, early 90s when I was young. So I can never remember her walking without a walker. So she wasn't really in the position to come over and do anything. I know she called the police once or twice, but nothing came of that. So I guess she probably just gave up on that.
Right.
So yeah, the neighbors were not very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough too, because you never know what they're going to say. I know that a lot of people will hesitate to call the police because there's like this misconception that, oh, that's her choice to stay there and all of these type of different things, or she's not going to tell them anyways. But I do think there has been some advancements in how we approach DV. I think we're a lot more intentional about the questions that we're asking and things like that. So we grew up, there's a lot of abuse in the household. You said that people thought you were a good kid. So what were the behind the scene things, right? We said that we got pregnant at 17. When did all of that start, where you started kind of pushing back on maybe some of the structure that the pastor dad was trying to place?
So I met my ex-husband when I was 14.
Okay.
And he was 19, almost 20.
Mm-hmm.
Dated off and on, and then picked back up probably 16. When I was 17, that's when I found out that I was pregnant. And my parents didn't really like him. He hadn't graduated high school, didn't have a job, worked for his dad part-time under the table, you know. Wasn't really trying to get anywhere in his life.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't feel like it was a good fit. Obviously that was true, but by the word ex-husband.
Right.
But 14 to 17, did I want to believe that? I mean, look, definitely couldn't believe my mom. Look who she chose to marry. I mean, you know.
Did anybody know that you were dating such an older?
Yeah.
And nobody said anything either.
Of course they did, but I'm a teenager. I know everything.
Right.
So
Another like PSA here. Sorry to keep doing this, but parents, please talk to your daughters about the manipulation that older men can have on teenage girls and can provide them with that thing that they think that they need and that they want, that safety and that security.
And I definitely wasn't getting attention at home.
Right.
So it was like the first person that ever paid attention to me, you know, and told me how amazing I was and how wonderful I was. And so, of course, I was going to fall for that person.
Right.
And do I wish now that, you know, my parents had maybe kept me away from him? Of course, I would have hated them at the time, but I still have a lot of resentment, clearly, anyway.
Right, yeah.
But I also have to say I do have 3 amazing kids from that experience, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah. But, okay, so 17, you're about to graduate. You left a note and you went to go move in with the boyfriend?
Nope, I just went for a drive because I just didn't want to be there when they found it.
Okay.
I came back later that night after they had some time to cool off and process it.
Did they kick you out?
Nope.
No.
They did not kick me out. They did say that he might want to stay away for a little while.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But actually, probably right before my oldest son was born, he moved in with me and my parents.
Oh.
That was an interesting dynamic for a while, too.
No kidding.
But shortly after he moved in, my grandma that we lived next door to passed away, and we ended up moving to Minnesota. Right.
Whoa.
Right. And then I was born and grew up all in the same house. I lived in the same house my entire life until I was almost 19 years old. Wow. And then I moved to Minnesota.
What made you
from Southern California?
Yeah, that's such a weird culture change.
In October. What? I don't know what we were thinking.
What? There was no thought process behind it. You guys were just like,
Well,
let's move to Minnesota.
My dad's mom lived there, and my brother had moved there, and then probably 6 months before that, my sister moved there because she had been living in Northern California, but got into drugs and thought that the only way she was going to get out of that lifestyle was to get out of there.
Okay.
So
we're 19. We're in Minnesota. We have one kid. And you're married now, or you're not married yet?
So that's an interesting dynamic too. My dad was very much well, if you're going to have a baby, you have to be married, but I'm not going to sign for you to legally get married because you're only 17 and this could be a bad choice. So we're just going to marry you at the church and give you a certificate that's not legal.
Oh.
So that was, I don't know, that was his philosophy. So about a year after that, we did get married in December, but yeah. That was
so 19.
Sort of married.
Sort of married in Minnesota, away from everything that you grew up knowing.
Yep.
Okay. And so what are we doing in Minnesota?
So there I got my first apartment. I moved out. I, for a while, was a stay-at-home mom and then found a part-time job because I went a little stir crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved into this, our rent started going up. And so we moved into this place that was like 7 miles out of town. And then I found out I was pregnant again around the time I was 21. Mm-hmm. And that is when my life became a little bit more difficult again, living so far away from everybody. I mean, I lived like you could have horses. You had to drive 7 miles to town. Town was California.
Yeah, that's
all of
everywhere.
California was Southern California, especially. I lived in LA. That was town, like it was a little bit of culture shock. And oh my gosh, I thought I was going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
That was really hard. And then had probably 2 cars and the engine block broke or something happened in one of them. And we had to get rid of it. And then it just seemed like it was thing after thing after thing. We couldn't get caught up on bills. We couldn't keep
Murphy's
a car
Law.
running. Yeah. And I'm about to have another baby. And so it was a really, really difficult time.
Okay. So what did you guys do? Was it like, we're just going to press forward? Was there anybody that you didn't have anybody you could reach out for help because they're across?
Well, I don't really like asking for help, but also, so my dad bought a car, like a $2,000 car that we drove around for a while. That was actually, it was like this ugly bright blue Buick. And that was the car that I came home from the hospital in when I had my second baby. And I can remember driving before I was supposed to after having surgery. And the door locks didn't always work. So I had to, after having a C-section probably a week prior, I had to crawl through to the back seat to get the baby out and get out of the car. And that was the last time I drove that car for a while.
I would not want to drive that car either. Gosh.
So I know recently I had my car break down and it's been a little bit traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And I know that people have to think I'm crazy because we still have, or like my husband has a car, my son has a car. It's not like I don't have access to transportation, but it all takes me back to this time in my life where I was just stuck in this little, it almost looked like a trailer house out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
7 miles out of town. The neighbors couldn't hear us. So it was... It still brings back those memories.
Yeah, that's tough. And that's the thing about trauma, and that's the thing about mental health that a lot of people also don't understand is that we don't pick and choose when our mental health is going to be affected.
Yeah.
Right? And triggers, no matter how much work you do, can happen at any point in time. And that's why I always super push therapy. Just even if it's, something that a scar so deep that you can't get rid of, I need to learn those tools to be able to manage that and deal with that and be able to work through that on my own, because I'm not always going to have somebody there to talk to. I'm not always going to have somebody there to reach out to, right? I mean, in a perfect world, I would love that, and I do have a support system, but, there is those times where I have to use those coping skills on my own. Okay, so you're 21, you're struggling pretty hard. What is husband doing for work?
Well, he was working at this plastics factory. I don't even know. They trimmed the plastic and not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like a blue collar type-ish guy.
Yeah, but it was a night shift, so he would sleep all day and then go to work at night and then get home super early and like play video games for 6 hours, but never really helped with the kids or did anything around the house, or I mowed the lawn. I did pretty much, I did the grocery shopping, I did the cleaning, I did the cooking, I took care of the kids. I did, I was basically becoming my mother.
Oh no. Okay.
So then I decided I would get a job again once we got a semi-working car. And that's kind of when I started seeing the outside world more and realizing this wasn't the life I wanted for myself. He started like staying out later and drinking and going to other women's houses. And I didn't tell any of my family that. I just said, I'm not happy. Things aren't working well. He's not treating me right. I don't think this is going to work. But my dad was a pastor and divorce is wrong. So family was not super supportive when I decided I wanted to move out with 2 kids. But I did it anyway, and they sort of helped with some of that.
Yeah.
And then I went back to get some of my stuff one day, and he'd been drinking, and I just remember a few bits and pieces of like the green wool carpet and how much I hate thinking about it, and the front porch of the house. And we would drive past there every once in a while when I went back to visit or something, and I don't even want to look at the place. I can remember repeatedly being sexually assaulted by him, and it didn't seem that way because he was my husband, so it had to be consensual, but we lived in 2 separate places, so clearly we were moving towards, not being together. And shortly after I moved out, I had found out that I was pregnant. And I was back in that 17-year-old body that didn't want to tell anybody and didn't want anybody to know, because I was out there trying to live my own life, trying to make things better. And here I am. What am I going to do as a single mom with 3 kids?
Yeah.
And I was working at like a part-time job at Subway, making minimum wage.
Oh, man.
So I eventually, when he couldn't pay rent, let him move back in with me, which was a huge mistake. He was not any nicer. I mean, he was still staying out, going to other women's houses and talking to them on the internet and sending weird pictures. And so I just kind of detached myself and found myself trying to sleep different schedules so I didn't have to be around him. But I also ended up in the ER because I thought I was having a miscarriage. And as much as I didn't think I wanted another baby, I didn't want anything to happen to this baby either. And I was repeatedly having to go back because I would suddenly start just bleeding so much that they just said, oh, well, you'll probably be fine in a couple days. I'm sure you're miscarrying. Well, I was one of 2 babies because I still ended up being pregnant and having that baby, but she was probably going to be twins. It's what they ended up determining.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Okay, so you were pretty much a young woman trying to raise 2 kids on your own, and it sounds like some abuse had started taking place. When did the abuse start?
He always was a little bit of I think kind of an angry person, but he never really struck me or hit me or anything like that. So I just assumed that it was okay because he wasn't physically assaulting me.
Right. Right. So for maybe some of the listeners looking back now, what were some of the signs that you've seen in him that other people can maybe look at and identify if they're in a similar relationship?
He would like pull at his own hair sometimes when he got stressed out, and that really kind of freaked me out. I don't know why, because it wasn't hurting me, but maybe I thought if he was capable of hurting himself, he would be capable of hurting me too. Right. I think our subconscious knows a little bit more than we do sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So between that and the yelling and just certain, if they're willing to call you all sorts of names that are going to hurt you, they're probably willing to hurt you physically too.
Yeah. And do you think that this was also, you grew up and you said like this was my normal. Do you think that that played a part in your relationship with him?
I think it probably did. I always told myself I would never be with somebody that hit me, but they don't have to hit you to abuse you.
Yeah.
And that was something that I didn't get until much, much later.
Okay. You've been in this abusive relationship, and it sounded like a kind of a manipulative relationship from the start of it, right? Now there's abuse, and the abuse sounds like it's increasing
Yeah.
over time. We're about to have our third kid, and he's back in the picture.
Yep.
And so what happens from there?
And I'm like going to be 23 with 3 kids.
Wow, you're still so young.
I know,
Holy
right?
cow, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we were I thought all of that was of a span of like
no,
4
no.
or 5 years. No, we
Nope,
just.
yeah, I was about 23, and I told him, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be at home, and you're not good for the kids. I don't want them to live the life I lived. So you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
No, you didn't. Oh man, yeah.
And so of course we had been going to church, and the pastor that married us came by and said, you know, I've never married a couple that has been divorced before, and so I really hope you guys can work this out. And I just remember thinking, he doesn't care one way or the other what happens to me. It's about tarnishing his reputation. And I had always been pretty active in church. I liked to sing in church, and I was told I couldn't do that anymore because I was getting a divorce, and God's not condoned divorce. So.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Right.
That is so tough. That's your safety blanket, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Is church, right? And your spirituality and your connection with a higher power. And they just took that away from you in a time that you needed that the most.
Yeah. I lost my husband. I lost my family. Certainly didn't support it, and then neither did the church. So I was basically me and my 3 kids at 23 years old, because I can remember when he left. The only thing he was concerned with taking was his computer, because gotta have the games and the girls that you've met online. He took his computer, some clothes, and just left, and didn't look back. He ended up ditching the car on the side of the road like 3 hours from his parents' house in Oregon, where they had moved, because it broke down.
Oh, wow.
And just kind of left it there. He never called and talked to the kids again. He never.
Really?
Yeah.
Was he ever, so you said he never helped out with the kids. Did he ever have a connection with the kids at all?
No, not really. He reached out recently after my son had his first baby, and that was the first time that he'd heard from him in, nearly 20 years.
Oh, my goodness. That's so tough.
The craziest thing to me, because I'm a grandma now, is that neither did his parents. Never had any communication with the kids or anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're 23, and you're on your own again. Because you've already been on your own, really.
Yeah.
There's just another body there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And before he left, I told him, before you leave, you're going to sign these papers, because I don't want to worry about somebody taking my kids away.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't have a problem signing over sole custody, but I did have to take all 3 of my kids, including my infant daughter, who was 4 months old, to the courthouse, because my mom didn't want to seem like she was condoning divorce. Right. So I brought them with me to the hearing.
Oh, wow.
That was fun.
Oh, man. I just want to say really quickly how impressed I am with you and the bravery it took to look your abuser in the face and say enough is enough, and I'm not doing this anymore. And can you maybe just highlight a little bit of what went into that thought process? What was the defining moment where you finally said, you know what, I deserve better, and I'm not going to let you do this to me anymore?
So when I was in high school, probably 16, because I could drive, I remember my mom and dad having a fight over something. And it was something really dumb. She had set off fireworks, the little worm fireworks in the driveway. And there was a little round spot on the concrete driveway. And that really irritated my dad. That was a 3-day fight. They didn't talk. And,
oh, my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. But so I said, I'm really worried about you. And I don't think this is normal. Why don't we just move out? I can get a job. I can start working. You don't have to be there. You don't have to be there because you need his support. And I know she probably thought I was crazy, but I meant every word of it. And I did not want my daughter to come to me at 16 years old saying, Mom, why are you still here? We have to get out of here. He's going to kill you, because that's how I felt. Yeah. So maybe the turning point was having a girl and realizing that I didn't want this cycle to repeat itself.
So you're talking about breaking generational curses and trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good for you. And I hope that your daughter understands, and maybe not at this point. I don't know how old your daughter is, but how much that took and how much just that alone probably impacted the trajectory of her life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's so you're an awesome mom just for that right there.
Well, they might disagree, but
well,
the 23-year-old kind of thinks so now because he's old enough to see the bigger picture and has his own kids. But she's 18, so of course
yeah, and that happens. Kids' perceptions are skewed sometimes, but we just continue to hold that space and love them, and yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of My Voice. For local services here at my house, please call 373-4357. That's 373-HELP.